Welcome, welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Riley. I am the host of the Uninformed States of America podcast, which you can go on the usapodcast.com right now and you can subscribe to. I'm here today on behalf of the Grassroots Democrats HQ in Los Angeles, and I am here today to talk. We are continuing this talk and these video blogs about the blue wave going forward. As everybody out there knows, we have an election, a big one coming up here in about a month and some change. So the stakes are getting high, and we just had the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the president is now talking about replacing her and everything like that. So there's a lot going on, but I'm here speaking with the director of the Grassroots Democrats HQ, and also too, just 3 generations of activism going on here, of women's rights activism, of activism for the blue wave happening here with the Levinsons. I have here Maria, Tamara, and Eve of the Levinsons. Hello, y'all. How y'all doing? I think I said you.
Hello.
Excellent, excellent. So happy to have y'all here. It's actually an honor to be able to talk to y'all right now, with 3 generations of the Levinsons here, because you guys really are actually out there showing what true activism actually does and how it makes a difference in the grassroots movement. But we know that, like Maria, you've been an activist for a while now, and you've had years of activism under your belt with the women's rights movements, with the anti-war movement. If I'm correct, I know I understand that you were a big community organizer during the civil rights movement. And with the death of RBG, many people are feeling like, things like Roe v. Wade could be overturned here pretty soon. And this is something that can really affect women's rights and everything that kind of goes along with that. What would you say to all those people out there who are now feeling like sitting this out, and to know that these elections have consequences?
Well, I would say 2 things. One, I would say it's essential for everyone to vote, no matter what their political orientation is. And it's especially essential for people to vote where there are attempts to suppress the vote and attempts to suppress people expressing what their political views are. So that's one thing I would say. And 2, I would say that my experience looking back over several decades is that there are setbacks that happen. Like if Trump gets his Supreme Court nominee through, no question, that'll be a big setback to us. But I've lived long enough and been political since the 1960s to know that this is only one period in time, and that we need to figure out where we can be effective and build organizations that reflect what our values are. So I think we should take a page from the Republicans, actually, who decided that they were going to build state legislatures which would agree with their point of view and which would gerrymander and which would appoint people. And I think that we need to have the long view too and figure out what we need to do to make sure that our voices are heard.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, you've seen this through time, just being an activist over all these years. But Tamara, let me ask you, a lot of people now feel like, because of RBG and all these executive orders and all these other things that are going on, at least from where I'm at, I know a lot of people are kind of feeling like giving up, and you are somebody who's out there, training these volunteers, recruiting these people, getting people excited or getting people motivated to vote. What would you tell people is at stake in this election still?
Wow. What is at stake? So first of all, I just want to say that what Maria just said, there's a lot of lines that I share about how to motivate people. I'm going to quote you. I quote you all the time. I base a lot about what I do on what I've heard and learned from you, which I tremendously appreciate. What is at stake? What is at stake is the fact that I grew up with rights that I took for granted. I grew up with the rights to control my own body. I grew up with the rights to be able to choose whatever job I wanted to do. I grew up with the rights to be able to say whatever I wanted to say. I am a Jewish American woman whose family, my dad came from Germany. I am a first generation American. So I know from watching what happened or to hearing what happened to his family, only half of them made it into this United States. And they came in because they were allowed to. We were open to it. Half of that family died in the Holocaust. They never made it here. I never knew my grandfather. And to me, this is a major issue. We need to be fighting for rights. I took them all for granted. I am here and living the life that I get to live on the backs of the people like Maria, who fought for the rights that I have, on the backs of the people who made it to the United States because we could have the rights that we have. I took them all for granted until I have to tell you, right around the last election cycle, when my daughter started asking me a ton of questions that I didn't know the answers to. I come from a social work background. I have an MBA in nonprofit management. I thought that if I fought for the right things, if I helped people the right ways, that whoever was in the White House, whoever was in government, would make sure that in the United States, our rights were actually preserved. Right. And what I've learned from my daughter and what I've learned from my mother-in-law is that that is not true. So I started to become an activist. I changed my entire way of working to be working for the electoral process. So what I want to say is, what is at stake is everything that I have lived on. Everything that I can do is at stake because the generation before me fought for it, and the generation that is coming after me is going to lose it. So that is what is at stake. If we want to have everything that we've had and more, we have to keep on working. And then when you look at it even further, I was really privileged. What about all the people that when I had my rights, they didn't have their rights? That is what is at stake. We are going to lose whatever we have made that we built on if we don't make the changes now to be able to take it further along. We are losing it all.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why it's so important for us to keep on, especially with this election and beyond. Well, Eve, let me switch things over to you real quick, because you are living in the shadow of your grandmother and your mother here, who have taught you very, very well. You are out there, one of the bigger activists I know, which is great. Let me ask you, how was your grandmother, you think, an inspiration to you and to your activism? And what are you telling people in your generation about how important it is? I can only imagine how many apathetic people you may run across, or people who may be like, I'm not interested in voting in this election. What do you tell them?
Yeah, well, so I think to answer your first question, my grandmother and my mom were probably the primary reason I am the person I am today and do the work I do today. I, from a young age, grew up knowing that when my grandmother was my age or a little bit older, that she was doing incredible work and being both a leader in the women's rights movement and a real ally and a co-conspirator in the civil rights movement. And that really shaped my view of both how I knew that I needed to fight for feminism, but also that I knew how I needed to support and get involved and be an ally in movements for groups that didn't necessarily affect me, but seeing the connection about how all of our, the oppression of all marginalized people are connected. I think that with regards to talking to people who are apathetic, I think that's a lot of people my age. I think Generation Z and millennials, we know that if we turned out and we voted, we would vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. But the establishment doesn't invest in reaching out to us because people are apathetic, which then only leads to people being more apathetic. It's really not that hard. If people see that a place that has a lot of money and a lot of resources is investing in them, they're going to be more likely to think that those same people will actually follow through on things that will make their lives better. But it's sort of a cyclical cycle there, which I think is important. So I think so often we talk about the apathetic youth, which, yes, there are more youth who need to go out and vote, but it's also the responsibility of campaigns, of parties to go and get those people to vote. And so I think that that's something that's missing. I think that when I talk to people, especially since RBG's passing, I know a lot of people who basically think that Trump getting another Supreme Court nominee is basically a done deal no matter what we do. And the sad reality is that it's not definite, but it's very likely. And so I think that what we need to focus on is that even if we lose the seat on the Supreme Court, that doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to fight back. But if we allow Trump and the Republicans to stay in power, then if we really get to a point where the next time an election comes around, chances are our votes won't count as much because they'll be able to erode the democratic institutions, pull back voting rights even more, and take away the rights of marginalized people. So by the time we get to the 2024 election, we already know right now that so many people's votes aren't counted, that so many people are suppressed from voting. It'll be even more so, and we'll have truly know about taking it back. The people on the Supreme Court are really old right now, most of them. And over the next 4 years, at least 1 or 2 of them is probably going to pass away or resign or get ill. And so the person who's in office the next 4 years, it's not just about the fact that Trump's been able to appoint what will now be 2, potentially 3 nominees. It's about everybody else who will also be appointed. And so I think that it's really about seeing, like, what can we do? And I think that the point that Maria made earlier about state legislators is so right. And we don't really invest in state legislators because we're so fixated on what happens on the federal level. And so it's really only a few groups that focus, and that groups like run for something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And man, wow, Maria Tamara, I can see where she gets it from. That is awesome. Yes, that fire. That is what's up. Let me ask all three of y'all a quick question real quick. How important are, and this is something that I'm sure just kind of resonates through the Grassroots Democrats HQ when you're talking to people, when you're making these phone calls and writing these postcards and things like that. How important are women's voices in this election coming up?
So I'm going to tell you that I just got off of a phone bank. There were, I think, 65 people on the call, and the majority of them were actually women. And the men that were on the call, when we were doing a regroup at the end of the phone bank, we're doing it with the Zoom rooms, exactly like we're doing this interview now. Wow. And the men were actually noticing that it was mostly women that were on the call. Women are powering this movement for the election process. Their voices matter. What we're also finding is, if you just look at the statistics within the various states, the women that are voting have a tremendous amount of power for how every state election is going to be chosen. All the up and down the ballot, the presidential, the Senate races, women's voices and women power is powering our blue wave. We need everybody to be working from every community in every single way. But if you ask how important is it, extremely important.
Absolutely.
And I would say that the role of Black women is really critical and crucial, both in terms of getting Biden the nomination, but also beyond that, about mobilizing their communities. I think they have a deep knowledge of what's at stake in this election, and that they are doing incredible work mobilizing their communities. So I think that the role of women is really important, and in particular, Black women.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think in terms of the electorate, women are really important in a few ways in addition to what they said. I think obviously what Maya said, especially about Black women, who we know are like the most consistent Democratic voters everywhere, and particularly in purple states in the South, and states like Alabama that weren't previously considered purple, but we've seen should be considered purple. They're really important. I think also, obviously, there's quite a lot of fixation on the like suburban white swing voter, who I think will be very important in states like Pennsylvania that are so predominantly white. But I think also women, when you talk about young people, women make up slightly, females make up slightly more than 50% of the population. So when you're looking at the youth vote, which isn't looked at a lot, the exact same issues that would make women vote in higher numbers for Democrats that do with older women is the same thing for younger women. The fact that our right to choose that state, the fact that discrimination on the basis of sex being illegal could also potentially be at stake. Those same issues are going to motivate young women, but the difference is that we never lived in a world where we had to question it. All the time, it's easy for me to forget, but then I remember that my grandmother, who's sitting with me here today, that she lived in a time when that wasn't the case, when that discrimination was legal. And when we make that so clear to people, I think especially young women, my peers, that just further emphasizes why this is so important. But I also think that women are leading the organizing fights that are happening. And I think that oftentimes you don't see women in the principal sort of positions or the head of an organization positions, but they're usually the ones that are powering it. And what we do have, though, that's unique is we have an opportunity where there are so many key Senate races and so many key House races and state legislative races where women are running, and we can increase their representation and also close the opportunity to have a woman in the White House for the first time.
And I would just add one other thing, which is about DACA and about women who are immigrants. I feel that the people who have the greatest knowledge about what our president has done against immigrants and locking families into the jails are also going to play a key role in this, because they understand what's at stake in this election.
Yeah.
And the Latinx community When you combine the power of the vote of the Latinx community with the young adults that are coming out and have the power when they go and they talk to their parents and they get them to vote, it is a huge, huge, huge effect. And so we need to be taking a look at supporting and standing up all the various communities that have power to make a difference, and make sure that they understand that their vote matters, that when they're doing relational organizing, which means that literally when a young adult goes home and they talk to their parents, they talk to everybody else, they have the power to be making the difference and to amplify what their vote, if they are 18 or over. If they're younger, it doesn't matter, because if they're younger and they're out there making a difference, they can get more people to vote. So I'm sure that there are communities that we have not mentioned, but the power of the youth, the Black, the Latinx vote, these are all places and spaces that are huge. And when you overlay that with the power of the women within those communities that are powering what is happening, and the young adults that are powering the messaging that is going out, there's a lot of opportunity for people to make a huge impact in the election right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's something that's amplified through the Grassroots Democrats HQ's efforts with phone banking, with the text messaging, with writing of the postcards. And is this something, I mean, Tamara, this is the last question I have. With only a month left, is this something that people can still do? Can they still make a difference in this?
What is really funny is that normally people would have thought about the very last weekend is when you would see the most people come out. Like all of a sudden people wake up and it is the weekend before November 3rd and they think, ooh, I got to start volunteering.
Yeah.
And it's a surge. What I want to say is that surge has to happen right now. Yeah, GOTV, Get Out the Vote, is starting right now. The mail-in ballots are going into people's homes. There are states that people are already voting in. And when that ballot is filled out and it goes in, that election is done for that person. So is there still time? I look at it this way. We still have over 1 month to make a difference. So yes, there's a tremendous amount of time. And when you join, you will be seen on a screen like this with people that are actually training you. Eve is actually helping the Grassroots Democrats HQ in a way in terms of being a youth coordinator. And those youth are online with volunteers, teaching them how to volunteer, how to make a phone call. So can you make an impact? Absolutely. Is there capacity for it? Yes. The beauty is you could do it from your home. You never have to go out, and you can be making phone calls across the country. So not only can you make an impact, you have to make an impact. No one wants to wake up the day after the election and say, should have I made that phone call?
Yeah. What could I have done? What could I have done to make to see that this didn't happen? Well, what you can do is log on to grassrootsdemocrats.org right now, or excuse me, grassrootsdems.org right now, and sign up, volunteer, get your activism on, and that way you can still make a difference in this election. So that's really important. Man, 3 generations of activism, 3 generations of fighting the good fight right here. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today, and thank you all so much out there for watching. My name is Mike Riley. Once again, log on to grassrootsdems.org and sign up to volunteer right now. Thank you. Peace.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.